Welcome to our panel discussion, and we will exchange ideas with those who have been part of the integration process. These young ladies have all been involved in integration, and because of their background, their experiences are also different. So altogether, these ladies illustrate that integration has different backgrounds, so there is no one story. My name is Sigrid Solnik, I am the moderator, and with me here I have Kaisa Saarman. She was born and raised in the northeast of Estonia in the Ida-Viru county. She's an attorney. Maria Sakarias, she has lived abroad for 10 years and returned to Estonia recently. So she's an expert on world education. Shorok Al-Sulaiman, she has lived in Estonia for 3 years and she's studying to be a midwife. And Sveta Grigorieva, she's a poet and choreographer and has been born and raised in Tallinn. So these are our panelists. And over the next hour and a half, I'd like to discuss the different experiences and perspectives of our participants, so their view of integration and its issues, and we're looking forward to your questions. I would like to open this discussion to the general public as well and listen to your thoughts and ideas. And another point to add, as the reason I'm looking at my telephone is that I'm scrolling for the questions. But in order to throw the ball into the court, then I'd like to ask you all, could you please try and think back? What was your first interaction with integration? What was your integration process like? Kaisa, I'd like to start with you. Hello, Sigrid has she introduced me. I grew up in the Ida-Viru county, northeast Estonia, in Voka, and I grew up in an Estonian community. So my experience and understanding of the process that arises when you are in a community that is a minority, the more you move towards Narva, then the closer you get Estonians form a minority. So this understanding that you can live your life in such a way that you do not speak the actual language. When I was growing up, I barely knew any Russian. I did study Russian at school, but it was just theoretical knowledge. And I didn't have much interaction and friends amongst the Russian-speaking community. And my first relation with integration as a process is from my university days, when writing papers at the time, then I could analyze these issues, and that's when I discovered that such a process as integration exists, and I could look at it that I should have been part of this process, but somehow it bypassed me. Maria, you didn't grow up in Ida-Virumaa. I am from Tartu, and that's where I went to school. I had one Russian-speaking friend, and she was from a Russian-speaking family, but I didn't think of it as an integration process. So I didn't realize it. And then when I was an exchange student, when I was in upper secondary school, then I experienced what it means that when you are in a country where you don't speak the language and you don't sense how the cultural norms work. But again, I didn't label myself as someone who integrated or didn't. Then when I went to university, that was in the UK, again, I didn't have this sort of a conflict, and I didn't have major issues. I didn't sense that integration is complex. But then during the migration crisis in 2015, I was living in the Netherlands, and I was working with different programs that promote integration, and also looking after the homeless who had migrant backgrounds. That's when I realized that this is migration as a concept that exists, and I started thinking of it in relation to the background of my country. Sharok, I'll just skip you and I'll ask Sveta. So yes, their integration is there, but you haven't had any experience. What about yours? Well, I think I don't associate myself with integration. I am someone who has assimilated into the Estonian society. So my father is a Russian speaker, but my mother is Estonian. So until I started school, most of my friends were Russian speakers. I grew up in Lasnamäe. And when I started school, it was an Estonian school. That's what my parents decided, that my brother and me, we would have our education in Estonian. And that's when in upper secondary school I started realizing we had the topics of integration, but then I realized that I am someone who is completely assimilated, and this was on account of my Russian identity. So I often feel that my Russian language skills cannot be compared to my Estonian language, but as integration, it doesn't sort of provoke any reactional feelings. People who have directly been involved in it, so Russian speakers in Estonia, so the tendency to react to the word integration, it is often painful. This I don't feel it. And Sharok, you have a completely different experience because you only arrived in Estonia not that long ago. And thinking of where you are from, when did you start consciously thinking of integration? Hello? I am 18. I came to Estonia 3 years ago. And the first time when we arrived at the airport, and that's when I started thinking how important integration has been in my life in Estonia. And that's when I started thinking, how will I manage? I'm sorry, my Estonian isn't as good, but language skills are something, and speaking the language of how to manage in Estonia, language is important. So I lived at different places, and my life perhaps wasn't as easy. So I lived in Turkey, then now in Estonia. My home in Syria was also in different towns, and that is why it was very difficult to adjust and cope. So I started thinking about what is the most important for me, and it is being able to speak the local language. Okay, yes, the elephant in the room is being able to speak Estonian. What about the others? Is this the most important thing, that integration is all about speaking the language of the country? Yes, language is a key into this cultural sphere, and language is a key to be able to communicate with people, and in order to be able to cope in the society. Language skills and learning the language are important, but on the other hand, from the Estonians' point of view, also the understanding that being able to speak the language is not the main thing. It's about the person being ready and wanting to be a member of the society. that you want to be a full member of the society. We all have our own experiences that when you do not speak this native language and you have to communicate with people who are good at this language, and for many people it is a struggle, and that Estonians should be perhaps more understanding and more supportive in towards these people who do not speak Estonian as a native language, and that people make efforts. Maria is nodding. Yes, language is important if you want to, for example, find a job in your field or if you want to study. But yes, we somehow are very stuck in this concept that language is very important. The people who don't speak Estonian as a native language, that this criterion is very difficult to fill, and that Estonian equals Estonian language. So this is something that we just can't let go of. We are so stuck in this concept. And I do hope that these things shouldn't be so linked. As we all often say, is that Estonian is a difficult language, and it's not an easy language to learn. So let's be kind to the people who are trying to speak Estonian to us. When preparing this discussion, I googled integration. What is the definition of integration? And when I googled, the first link you get is the Ministry of Culture, their website. And this is perhaps a provocative question, but this is the bone I'd like to throw to you. So the website says that the objective of the integration policy is to create Estonia as a cohesive society so that everyone has a comfortable life in Estonia, that this is a society where people from different backgrounds, different culture have adopted the Estonian identity. They consider Estonia as their home country, and that the basis of integration is Estonia being an open society and honoring, respecting other countries and adopting the Estonian identity. So today we have heard about how this concept has changed and how it should be reviewed, and that integration is context-based, and in Estonia we have this discourse of survival, but in everyday knowledge of people, this adoption of the identity, of the Estonian identity. So if you want to integrate, you have to adopt the Estonian identity. And as an anthropologist, what is an identity? If we want someone to adopt this Estonian identity, what do they have to do? Yes, one thing is language, the Estonian language, but what are the other aspects? So when does the moment arrive when you say that I have adopted the Estonian identity? Sveta, what do you say about identity? What are my opinions about identity? Well, I'd just like to reflect the previous question. Yes, language is important, but integration. Language and language skills, they are a condition, but does it bring people together, and does it bring communities together? That's a different issue. I consider myself an Estonian. I have a Russian name, I have a Russian father, I went to an Estonian school, most of my friends are Estonian, so I consider myself an Estonian. I don't know if we've heard the term ethnic Estonian, and it's a very strange term. I think of myself, I'm Svetlana Grigorieva, and you get this sense that, excuse me, what do I have to do? That is my name. So what do I actually have to do in order to belong to this correct ideological Estonian group? That yes, I know the Estonian culture. I know it better than an average Estonian. I speak Estonian better than an average Estonian, but I'm not 100% ethnic Estonian. So I believe that someone who says that I'm Estonian, that's it. Maria? Yes, you can define your own identity. You say what is important to you, whether you tie it to the nationality or the state or the idea. We have people who are from different cultural backgrounds, but we have the group of those who have returned to Estonia. So I was away for 10 years, but we have young people who have been raised in Estonian families abroad, and they come back to Estonia, and maybe their Estonian language skills are not so good. Or maybe their grandparents were Estonian and they want to come and live in Estonia, and we maybe don't need a unified definition. So this definition that you read out, I liked things that were mentioned, but adopting the identity, this is something that I don't quite agree with. Integration is a process that it doesn't mean compromise. It doesn't mean that somebody has to give up something, but it is, reaching out your hand, and 1 + 1 is 2 or even more perhaps. And Sharok, what do you think? What are the expectations? You can already speak the language. I don't know if you actually want, but that you have integrated and that part of you is Estonian. So what are the other expectations? What else do you have to do? So if I go back 3 years to the time period 3 years ago, so when I first arrived, I didn't know anything about Estonia. Nothing. And then one thing after another, I started looking at things. So knowing the language, then the culture, I started asking questions, learning about it. I tried to find friends. I went to an Estonian school. I graduated from an Estonian language school. So I have adopted to life in Estonia. But when I look at things and when I look at myself, I see myself as a foreigner still, someone who has come to live in Estonia. So I constantly try to learn about the culture similarly to other Estonians, but I cannot forget my own culture, which is also very important, and that is that I want to live in Estonia, but I don't know if I can actually, stay here, if I want to stay here. So life goes on. I'm studying. I want to find a job, work, help other refugees, maybe other foreigners who've come to Estonia. So when I started my midwifery studies, then the idea is that I want to help others, blend in, not just be a foreigner.
So you want to give your own input to become part of a whole. Yes. Here for a couple of times we heard hints to the risk of losing your own culture. For example, being or going to the Estonian language school, parents very often are afraid that children lose their identity or part of it or their background. And let me here raise the issue of what do you think? The process of integration as it is here. Are Estonians prepared to take steps to meet the migrants? So, or even encouraging them or reminding them that don't worry, you don't need to give up part of your own identity if you want to become an Estonian. To me, I think that there is not very much of this sort of readiness among Estonians. And the prevailing idea is still that if you want to be integrated in Estonia, you need to take over the local identity. And it is probably because it is not only the minorities who are afraid of losing their identity, but even the majority, the ethnic Estonians, are still afraid to lose their identity. And this is definitely a hinder to the whole process of integration. And to my mind, Estonians are not ready to give up this mindset. Item 1, you need the language level of this and that to become integrated in Estonia. Secondly, ideological criteria. And after that, we may consider accepting you. So Estonians still see integration not like a two-dimensional process, but one-direction process. Maria, a question to you. You've seen the integration processes in other countries, and if you compare the readiness of Estonians to take a step to meet foreigners here and in other countries, well, drawing these comparisons, I think we have to consider the history. I was born in 1991 in the Republic of Estonia, and even after all this time, we still have that feeling of losing our identity, losing of what we have managed to get. And well, those other countries, they have a lot more of experience. They have long-lasting programs for integration, and they don't have that well, fear of meeting mystic people from elsewhere. And nowadays in Estonia we speak about new migrants, and well, we have several projects here in Estonia where we have people with very different backgrounds. And if you don't have those personal contacts with people, it is so easy that you start having those considerations, or you like think that something is this or that, but you don't know what is really. So, stereotype, that's the word I was looking for. So, do we take turns in answering? Okay, I can answer. I think that yes, there is not enough of this readiness on behalf of Estonians. But one also has to understand that for Estonians, yes, there is a very difficult history. Historical background is important. Perhaps it's more a trend that is characterizing older generations. But Estonians still feel themselves as a minority. They have to be on guard to defend themselves, so they identify easily themselves with a small vulnerable group, and I think this is a big mistake. You have to get let go this knowledge of big Russia being behind the border and ready to prevail over you. And on the other hand, we do have those, let's say, buds of multicultural society here. When we speak about the change in attitudes, when do you think that the first Russian-speaking song will be taken into the program of the song festivals? I think we've done that already. The youth song festival had actually a song by Nublu, a very popular well, pop singer here, and or perhaps it's a urban legend, but at least among young people that's what they speak about. Fear. Fear, that's understandable. But on the other hand, when you take the repertoire of the song festival, be it even the youth song festival, and you have a Russian-speaking song there, you still get the idea that, well, we've given in. We have given up part of ours, or something that truly belonged to us. So a lot has to do with personal contacts between Estonians and Russian-speaking people. When I was growing up in Ida-Viru County, I didn't have a single Russian-speaking friend. The first ones, the first contacts I started to have when I was a student at the university. And that's when the understanding also started to grow, that these people have big choices to make. For example, when they have children, whether they will put them into an Estonian language kindergarten or Russian-speaking kindergarten, or being young parents, they have to think hard what to do, how to behave in order to guarantee a smooth integration of their children into the society. And I realized that these topics are very important. So that was an eye-opener, or the being aware of these challenges that some people have in Estonia. And when everybody perhaps opens their eyes to these challenges and accepts that, yes, they are there, then it may also diminish the fear of losing a bit of your own. Continuing with the same topic, in the last integration monitoring, there was also brought out that Estonians and Russians don't have so much contact. For example, after working hours, you close the door and you go back to your respective homes and friends and communities. Sveta, let me ask you, do you see that it is changing in time already, or where do you see those contact points in the future can be? I hope that it is changing. And as I said, for me, the change was very categorical, very sharp. So up to the school, Russian-speaking friends, starting with the school, Estonian-speaking environment. I was born in 1988. And at that moment, this belongingness to a clan was very important. You belong to this group. So, and as said, most of my friends were from Russian-speaking community during my childhood, but not later. And perhaps it's not news to everybody, but Yofi was the quickest segregated post-socialist town. Locally, a lot can be done, and I think quite a lot has been done on the grassroots level. For example, to bring a popular Estonian band to give a concert in Lasnamäe, predominantly Russian-speaking residential area in Tallinn. But I don't think that it would be enough. Speaking about school time, we didn't have not a single joint project or lesson or camp or meeting or evening or field trip together with Russian-speaking schools. I don't know how it is now, but that is definitely something that would help to create these contacts, to get to this sort of experience that you see it's possible. Recently I read an article by Maris Hellrand about the segregation of after-school children hobby schools, and there is also a big segregation there. So would it be possible to have those sports schools and other art schools together for both children? And all of a sudden, it appeared so simple that this might be the field where we can bring together Estonian background children and Russian background children, sports trainings and other, after school places or groups. Yeah, that's an integration project. Of course, it should be labeled like that, it is because we want to integrate you. It is just something that should be randomly done because it's normal. And at the end of the brochure, there would be this little text that the event is financed by the Minister of Culture. Okay, now we still speak about Russian-speaking community and Estonian-speaking community. But as a matter of fact, we have representatives of 194 nationalities in Estonia, which means that the picture is so much more colorful than obvious from the first sight, and if you draw conclusions on our discussion here. When we speak about integration, we automatically think about Russians or Russian-speaking people living in Estonia, whatever term you use. But more and more people are coming from different cultural backgrounds, and we have also a growing number of people returning to Estonia whose children very often have to face the issues of integration. Maria and Sharok, what do you think? Speaking about integration policy or the Estonian attitude towards integration, do you think whether or when or why, what should be considered to bring into integration a little bit broader perspective so that we don't just think about Lasnamäe or Ida-Viru as Russian-speaking territories of Estonia when you say the word integration? Maria, would you like to start? Yes, it's a fact. If we look at the figures, be it the people who returned to Estonia or new immigrants, and if you rely only on statistics, the biggest number is the returning people. But we don't notice them, and it doesn't seem to be a considerable group at all, because these people usually speak Estonian, and it is not so difficult to integrate for them compared to the new migrants. But to my mind, Integration Foundation in Estonia has very actively keeping pace with these processes. For example, what are the main problems of the returning people, whether they can get their child into the kindergarten, and moving back from another country is not that easy a process. Sometimes it takes a year and a half, and there are so many practical questions that need to be solved. And then there is always this emotional side. Perhaps after a couple of years, you think that, okay, I may have changed, but the society here has not changed that much. But if you have been away for 10 or 20 years, believe me, to come back and to feel yourself welcomed or at home, it is so much more difficult. And that's why I think that there is a clear need to broaden the perspective of integration. And I think that different groups, migrating groups, should be made more visible and contacts with them enhanced. Sharok, what's your opinion? I think that what can be done, I was thinking when I started to work with the refugee helping projects, it was called the Integration Accelerator. And I thought that perhaps I can help this project. I don't know, I haven't got the feedback whether my activities were useful or did they have an impact. Culture, education, everyday life. I think that I could make a change, because with my 3 years of experience I understand a bit how Estonians are living and how they do different things, cultural contacts. Each person can assist integration personally, doing something, even saying hello to others. For example, when foreigners come to Estonia, they expect the first thing, they expect Estonians to take the first step. They are a bit afraid. They are in a new place, in an alien place. They don't know whether Estonians are friendly. They don't know that. And they expect the first step to be taken from the locals. And this is where everybody can do something. A small thing, even one word, for example, greeting. Can you give us an example with the contact with an Estonian where you felt that there was a lack of openness or readiness to communicate? For example, I have been to many camps, and in those camps there were very many different nationalities, with the Russian, with Estonian backgrounds and many others. And the most important thing was that we didn't turn much attention to where did that person come from, what was the origin. For us, important was to try to communicate, try to talk to each other, and do things together without paying any attention where did they come from or what was their nationality or even culture. We tried to understand each other. Okay? Very well.
So we have discussed that there's fear related to integration from both sides. The locals, no matter whether they speak Estonian or whether they speak another language, so we should have more contacts. And moving on, so the issue with integration is that we lack those contacts, interhuman contacts. And what other challenges can you think of? What other issues are there related to integration? Any other major issues? Kaisa? So the new immigrants and those who are returning, I can't say much about these groups. But thinking of the Russian-speaking community, it is also very important to understand that a certain part of these people are elderly and they are having difficulties adapting and learning the language. They have lived in their communities for decades and they have coped, they have managed until now. So how do we integrate them? How do we include them? What does Estonia have to offer to them? That is a challenge. Trying to understand that the young people may be more flexible, they are open, they move around, they travel, they have more contacts, and they maybe feel the need that they have to learn to speak Estonian, but there are people who don't have this necessity. Estonia and our society should also address things at these parts of the community, so that's a challenge. But this means that we have to rethink integration, that maybe you don't actually have to speak Estonian, and that brings us back to the previous. Well, I do agree. My father is a good example. He's approaching 70, and in our family we have a father who is Russian and then 3 Estonians, me, my brother and our mother. And as for speaking, learning Estonian, it's not been easy. I've seen the Estonian language textbook on his little work table for decades, but he hasn't had any time to learn the language because of working all the time. But he has his family who communicates in Estonian, and he still hasn't been able to learn Estonian. And I've often thought about why is it? Is it that, yes, that it's not easy for an older man to start to learn a new language, but often I feel frustrated. You have 3 people who speak Estonian and you haven't been able to learn the language. But in rethinking integration, this is the starting point. Maybe my father is just an exception, but there are many families where children are Estonian and speak Estonian, and one of the parents doesn't speak Estonian, and that's the way things are and will be. So it depends on the person's age. Many other factors also play a role. And sometimes I feel that, doesn't he feel lonely? Doesn't he feel that he's not included into our family, and then part of a larger group, and then part of the society? It's a complicated issue. Sharok, what about you? So what is the big issue? Anything else that you can add? Just to give you an example, so during this COVID pandemic, where I haven't had many contacts with Estonian speakers, at least in my family, we don't see any people, we don't maybe go to the shop every day. But in my everyday life, yes, I do interact with people. But my other family members, they actually are at home, they're stuck there, and we speak our native language, so we have our own culture, the food we eat, everything that's related to our life and culture. So my mother, my father, they don't have any contacts with Estonians and links with Estonian culture. And this is an issue and major problem for our family. So sometimes they just can't understand, why is it that this is how things are. Well, as children, we have changed, we have adopted, but our mother and father, they have stayed the same. So yeah, they don't have many contacts with Estonians, and that is a major problem. also lacking these contacts and this level, and COVID obviously hasn't improved things. I will just share my thoughts. So the integration monitoring survey indicated that there are issues in the labor market, that Russian young speaking Russians, they have issues finding jobs. But I, as someone who returned, wanted to share this view. So the new immigrants and attitudes towards them, that perhaps people are narrow-minded, being acceptable. When I lived abroad, I often sensed this feeling that we didn't want to go back to Estonia because we won't be accepted, and people of different cultures, different skin color, different languages won't be accepted. So having lived in the Netherlands, when the society is so multicultural and we're so used to it, and I did visit Estonia back then. I came as a visitor, and I felt pain. It was painful for me how closed our society is. We didn't realize that we're part of this globalizing world where integration is normal and we have to adapt. So we were enclosed. So this narrow-mindedness that we have, I don't know how big the issue is, but when living outside Estonia, this is viewed as a problem, and that's why talents don't want to come back to Estonia. But me, as somebody who has returned and not being accepted, this is maybe just a feeling, and this is not true. So we've organized Zoom meetings where we have people who have returned to Estonia, who are considering returning, and often the question arises, I have worked abroad, my income was better, I have better sort of titles, is someone going to look up at me, so to say? And when I come back, am I going to find a place, and people won't think that she's or he is better, look at him or her that worked in Norway, and who does he think he is? I haven't come across this type of an attitude. There are so many of us who have worked and studied abroad. Every organization has someone. So we are accepted. So when you're abroad, you sense that things will be complicated, that people are afraid. That's an interesting thing. As an anthropologist, I know how you sense reality. It affects your behavior, and your practices are affected by this. Yes, when you're alone, then yes, you take this step. I thought that no matter what I've experienced in Estonia and whether I'm affected by it or not, but I want to be somebody who says hello and smiles to the bus driver and invites people of different cultural backgrounds into my house. So I'm a different Estonian, so maybe it's my sense of mission. But if I had a family and if I had children, then I would reconsider a number of times. Could I just ask you, where did you get this decision, where did you get to the point that this is when I want to come back to Estonia? It was actually quite a quick decision. So 10 years I was away, and I never thought of coming back. But last year in spring, I was walking down the street, and I thought, this is now the time. And I sensed that I don't feel home at that society. I didn't interact with that particular street and that community, and I wasn't really looking at the COVID figures in the Netherlands, but I was looking at the statistics in Estonia. So it was like a short circuit that I had. I didn't feel at home anymore, and at that point I didn't word it. But here in Estonia, I was listening to a podcast, the founder of Founderbeam, who has lived abroad, and he said that when living abroad, we can never do as much for Estonia when we live at home. So yes, when we're Estonians abroad, we have a yes, if we're diplomats, then we have our role. But there are tiny little ants, and we all are individuals. you are working there, you can study there, but this sense of us is what mattered. I wanted to deal with international issues. I have worked in Asian countries, but what is it that I have done here in Estonia and made our society better? And that was the moment when I realized that I have to come back. But those two thoughts that occurred from the broader context, and Sharok mentioned this, the need to give, that you want to be part of the us, and you express it by doing something which has that the society can benefit from. And then this feeling of sensing things, and this is something that we cannot measure in surveys, but at some point, or you feel that I don't belong anymore. So many people who live in Estonia and walking the streets here, they feel that they don't belong here, but they've nowhere to go. So do I have a direct link to this country? And this sense of belonging, it's got to do with the people. You can speak the language or not, but if you have the friends that surround you, you feel at home. No one wants to comment anything else about feelings, but I also wanted to introduce something else: intersectionality. And this is something that came out of the monitoring, the inequality, which we often don't speak of, perhaps, that experts don't speak about it, that if you're born as a girl into a Russian-speaking family, then things are much more complicated than when you're born into an Estonian-speaking family. And if you're actually born as a boy into an Estonian-speaking family, then you will be just fine. So I'm just exaggerating a bit. But this intersectionality is something that Sveta's family example illustrated. The father, however old he is, starting to learn Estonian, and he's elderly, and he has to go and talk to somebody, and he makes mistakes, and people will look down at him. So if we could actually integrate, so is inequality going to disappear? Are those things linked, or are they separate? As an Estonian, and being aware of this topic, it actually reached me through Sveta's talk a few years ago on the day of the restoration of independence in the President's Rose Garden. And when I was listening to Sveta delivering her speech, and I thought that, is it possible that someone with the same skills, who a priori is in a worse starting position because her name is Nastya or Sveta? So this was something new that I learned, and it was an eye-opener. I thought about it, and I called my friend. Both of her parents are Russian, and until she started university, she went to a Russian-speaking school, and I called her and I asked, so how do you feel about it? Is it really like that? Is your experience the same? Because I've never thought of it. And my friend said that she doesn't have this feeling, that things have gone well for her, everything has been okay, so she's like an example of integration. But she knows people who feel like it, and that who have the same experience. So through this strong message in Sveta's speech, this reached the awareness of Estonians that it's an issue. That's an interesting thing, because the feedback I got when I delivered this speech, it was actually misunderstanding And when I said it out loud, that when I said that if you come from a working class family and you're Sveta, Vera, or Masha, you're from Lasnamäe or Valga, then your starting position is different compared to Andres, who lives in the city center of Tallinn. But I don't know how people interpreted it or understood it. They thought that I was speaking about xenophobia and that this is xenophobic discrimination. There isn't much of that, and this is something that we don't come across thinking back 10 years or 20 years ago when it was an issue. But I'm speaking about this structural and systematic inequality. When we look at statistics, then we see, and I'm not trying to discredit that if you're an Estonian born in Lasnamäe and you have an Estonian name, yes, it's not very easy for you either to get a better job. But Estonians often understood it that you're Russian with a Russian name, you're called Mihhail Kõlvart, that means that you cannot become the president of Estonia. So I wasn't talking about xenophobia, but I was talking about this structural inequality which exists. And we cannot hide our head in the sand. This is what I tried to talk about. I grew up in Tartu, and being Estonian, I don't know if it is hiding our head in the sand, but it is sincere unawareness. And I've heard this new expression about cultural blindness. And the thing is that you don't actually sense it. You don't realize that this is a problem. So I didn't sense it, that there were people who have such problems like you mentioned, Kaisa, that the structural inequality, that it's not visible. It's very difficult to sense. So when I started university and I had a friend from Estonia who didn't speak a word of Estonian, a Russian speaker in Estonia, and that's when I started realizing that, oh, how is this possible? And I didn't sense that there are thousands of people like that. I grew up in Tartu, and that I didn't realize that there are so many of others who only speak Russian, and that's it. And, you know, there's nobody to blame. And I can't say that I'm completely ignoring this issue, but it's just that when you are aware, then you have the responsibility to solve the situation, and you can take a step towards others and not just wait that the others are going to approach me. Yes, but when such things are pointed out, that is what we learn from. For many Estonians, I think Sveta's message, they got it right. You know, I got so much verbal bullying from this, but my perspective was different at the time. But I do hope that people understood what I was trying to learn. And I did. I learned myself a lot what can be said out loud in public and what cannot. So this is the, being blinded by privilege, that you can take this particular angle and you look at things that, so many things are not good, and trying structurally to change it. So it's not to do with the fact that Estonians have a negative attitude towards other nationalities and Russians. Of course, yes, there are always people who are xenophobic, but that's something general. So it is a structural inequality that I tried to stress. And it's very difficult to acknowledge your own privileges, that I have had access to such information, access to such people, and such symbolic capital. These are privileges that I have. And how do you use these privileges in order to change the society and make it a little better, at least? Because I didn't have any illusions with my speech that it would change so much. Well, I have to say that it changed things for me. And I really sensed that I have been so privileged, and I have this friend who has a different background and graduated from the same course that me. She's just as successful, but that was the point when I realized that her journey may have been much more complicated than mine, getting to the same point. So I got the message. But at least somebody got my message.
Let me ask now about the structural inequality. Sharok, I address this question to you and your experience. Also from the monitorings and surveys, we find out mostly about the Russian-speaking congregation that it is there, this structural problem. But for me, it seems to be that we keep falling into the same pit over and over again. Sharok, have you had experiences of your own that there is structural inequality or with Estonians? Yes. Yeah, I can give you examples. For example, once I had been in Estonia for about a couple of months, and I went to the doctor's eye specialist, and there was a woman who was Russian by nationality, and with me I had somebody from the refugee help, and she was an Estonian. And when I went to the doctor's, she told me I didn't know how to count in Estonian, and yeah, you know how they check the eyesight. There are different figures on the screen, and I started to name them in Estonian, and that Russian-speaking doctor told me that you're not Estonian. Why should you say that in Estonian? And I answered that, well, I don't know Estonian, but I know the figures, numbers. So the Russian-speaking doctor would rather have me speaking not Estonian, and that seemed to be very, very strange. And then I started to think, so what language should I speak in then? What language should I start studying? And my little sister, she started to study Russian, and she speaks Russian now. She doesn't speak in Estonian. And when she went to the school, the first form, she went to the Estonian school. And in that school, well, when she goes out with her friends, Russian-speaking friends, then she feels like a Russian. But it is not so much dependent on places, locations. I have lived in Lasnamäe, I have lived in Mustamäe. For our family, there is not a big difference. We are not Estonians anyway or anywhere. And if they don't understand our language, it's their problem, not ours. And well, I always keep reminding myself that, okay, if I speak in Estonian and they don't understand me, it's their problem. If I speak in English, they don't understand me, it's their problem. How many languages should I know in order to make myself understandable? I have so many different roles in this life. I have friends, I have work, I have things. And for example, I didn't know how to take the tram, for example. That was also something new for me. And there were so many new things I had to learn, not just the language. Yes, and this is a very good illustration of what aspects should be considered when we speak about integration. So there are so many other things that you have to take into consideration besides language. I think in Lasnamäe, relatively many people manage with Estonian. Have you been there recently? That's again a very interesting thing to say. Because from the media you get the idea still that nobody speaks Estonian in Lasnamäe. That's definitely not true. Very many people speak Estonian there. When I went to Narva, and it was free stage or Vaba Lava performance, and I also thought that, oh dear, I have so many stereotypes myself. And for example, automatically people started to talk in Russian to me because of my name, probably. And well, when I approached somebody, a technician, for example, in Narva, I also started to talk in Russian because I somehow thought that in Narva everybody speaks Russian. And then it came out that that person was actually preferring Estonian as a language of communication. Those two communities are separate, but it doesn't mean that inside those communities people don't speak respective languages. In Russian community Estonian, in Estonian community Russian. It's just that these two communities have so few contacts between each other. Language is there, language skill is theirs, but the problem is elsewhere. Sounds very nice. I am a poet, as you know. Now, coming back from the structural inequality to the point of contacts and the need to have the contacts between different communities and the need to understand others. So, you know, there is the proverb that you see a little pin in somebody else's eye, but you don't see the tree in your own. Challenges to integration. Is there something positive about that? It's a new generation which has grown up already. Young people probably have a different understanding, also different expectations. So what do you say? What has been done well during integration up to now? For example, joint camps of young Russian and Estonian speaking children, or what else? I think that it is good that we have information channels meant for our Russians in Russian language. This is the Estonian broadcasting company TV2, which is TV Plus, which is in Russian-speaking Russian language. And this is one way how to bring Estonian culture closer to the other language group. And local Russian-speaking people also feel as part of the Estonian society because they are following Estonian media, official Estonian media. So they don't need to watch only Russian TV channels anymore. I think on festivals in Lasnamäe and also in Narva involving local communities or groups in organizing those festivals, bringing Estonian pop artists with their concerts. And these are small events that are necessary to organize. And again, not with this big slogan, now we go and integrate, now we do something under integration program. It shouldn't be advertised like that, but it is something that is done that in reality helps integration. For example, this spring, for the first time, I participated in the program Language Friend. It's a program which the Integration Association is responsible for, and people are brought together, people who want to practice either Russian or Estonian, and either it's over phone or some other platforms can be used, so just to talk to each other. So two people who otherwise would never meet under different circumstances, and that's also part of the integration, improving language skills, bringing together two people, so personal contact, a very small thing, but on the other hand, not so small at all. And there are many people who have been brought together with the help of this program. And there are many more who are willing to participate. That's a good example. Something that is good or has been done well for migrants in Estonia. There are 2 places in Estonia. First, a place where they can start living first. It is like a center for the newcomers or new migrants. They get there, they learn a bit about the language, about practical things like how to use a bus, how to take a tram, and all these things, or computer skills. When I lived in Turkey, I didn't know how to use a computer, and it was good that there were places like that. And it wasn't meant for Estonians. And from that point of view, there was the pressure of this extra, shame was missing, that I didn't want to show to Estonians that I know so little or I don't understand of this. So it was good that I could have this introduction elsewhere. And then I started to feel myself a little bit more safe. And only after that we moved from that center to the big city. And from then on, with my family, I became already part of this life, local life. That's what I liked in Estonia. 2 places for refugees and migrants for the first initial introduction. Yes, I have also got positive feedback about that. And culture. Culture is the joint language, because there you don't need the words. You can dance, you can sing. And also IT and programming is actually a joint language. We don't need this everyday language to communicate, and you can have very many interesting IT programs. And this is where young people, young Russian-speaking people or returners from other countries to Estonia feel themselves absolutely safe and sure, no matter what's the everyday language you use is. And when we want to organize another program like this, we suddenly felt that there was so much on offer already that it became somewhat difficult for the youth to choose to pick participation in one or third or other program, very similar content. But because of my work, education, global education programs, so that's why perhaps it seems to be important to me, but I don't know whether the broader communities in Estonia think that it's important. In summer, we organized youth camps. We had people from 12 to 16 years old, and half of them were people who still lived abroad, but they were planning of coming back to Estonia, and or the children of theirs. And this was like an introduction to life in Estonia. Very simple activities, games, and dancing, and yeah. So you can start with such joint things. And the conclusion I can draw from that is the grassroots level and everyday approach and culture. Especially speaking about young people. If a famous rap group comes and performs, this has an effect on young people. I was reading the last paper Myyrilehti weekly about cultural issues for young people. And they were speaking about Itä-Viru County and about the divide between environmental movement for young people in Russian community and Estonian community. Even if they stand for the same thing, for example, a youth group set up who was anti paper pulp industry in their community to be set up. And these two environmental groups, they didn't even know that they existed. There was a Russian-speaking action group and there was an Estonian-speaking action group. And the same can happen also about activities for young people and activities for older people. They don't know or are not aware that they are there. And I think what is also a positive thing in integration policy, that this so-called Russian card is not used in politics anymore. During elections and political life, the Russian card was something like a trump card. So if you wanted to have antagonism, it was just enough to take out the Russian card on the table, and that was a hinder for all sorts of progress or progressive things. And I think that it's good that we have stopped using it anymore in political life. But in the broad picture, yes, culture can activate, but they don't change the big picture. If we want to change the big picture, we need something else. We can't afford to expect that we will have those personal, individual contacts, and we have those programs who set the platform for such contacts. It is good, but it can't do all the work. And now, for example, the government or the state, yes, they are trying to get to the generation of 40 plus who live in the countryside or those close communities. And hence my next question, what next? Sveta, you raised the idea that the government or the state should do something. I think that we should start introducing more actively the joint schools for different language groups. There have been so many sociologists or other scientists who say that there are these models and these models and that models. They do function, but now you have to implement these models into reality, practical life. And in Itä-Viru, you probably can feel that xenophobic vibe still, because there are many parents who think that their children are as if losing something if they now have to get more Estonian. I am not a specialist, but I have read a lot about it, and I think that it is possible to bring children together. And I think that it just has to be done. The models are there, but they have to be implemented. Nobody is speaking about closing down Russian schools, but we need those two-language schools or joint schools where both Estonian and Russian-speaking children study together. Before I go on with my next question, let me remind everybody that it is still possible to ask questions via web. Okay, joint schools. And if you are the one who can decide, now all the resources at our disposal, we will focus on joint schools. Yeah, my idea is also that when we speak about integration in Estonia, everything starts with education. And I have also worked for a short period in school, open school. Yeah. First, perhaps these language groups were kept quite apart from each other, but if they are physically located on the same premises, well, this division starts disappearing. And for example, even the information about different events where you can participate, that comes to you much quicker like that. And Estonian image, speaking about education, in terms of education abroad, is very, very high. We know about the results of PISA tests, so the quality of Estonian education seems to be high in the skies abroad. But also speaking about grown-up learners, we should somehow favor or enhance the contact-based language practice and using all sorts of modern IT technologies and measures.
Yes, education is the most important aspect with integration. That's where it doesn't matter whether you're Estonian or Russian or whether you're a refugee. If you've come here to study, you're here to learn. You're not just here to observe, and nobody is asking you where are you from and what language do you speak. You're here, you're in Estonia. And the official language is Estonian. And the common thing that unites these learners is the language. They are friends and they are here to learn, to study, no matter what their skin color is or what color their hair is. I have brothers and sisters. They attend different schools here. And as I said, some of my brothers and sisters speak Russian, some speak Estonian, and some have dark hair, others slightly lighter. And we always stress that if you are there to study, then just do it. So you have come together in school, and the main thing you concentrate is studying, and it doesn't matter who your friend is, whether they're Estonian, whether they're Russian. And if you have any refugees as your friends, then why not? I'll just throw this thought into the air. Correct me if I'm wrong, but we should focus more on the content, and perhaps we shouldn't stress this integration factor at all. Just some food for thought. Yes, absolutely. So I'm not going to go and perform at Station Narva, but I'm going to and coming back to the beginning, why I consider myself, well, I think of myself as Estonian, someone who has assimilated, but this is because why my parents decided that me and my brother, we would be educated in the Estonian language from the start. But unfortunately, I wanted that my Russian cultural identity would also be supported, and my parents, they didn't do this. Maybe they didn't have enough time or will, or I don't know why, but I wish that integration was as a two-way process. It's not that we expect that they somewhere over there will integrate and we will wait until they have integrated. So it's a two-way thing. And integration isn't assimilating, and this is something that we hope that they will assimilate, that they will become Estonian, that they will Estonianize. But that's not the point of integration. The point of integration is that, well, in a perfect world, if I started school now, somebody could ask me, so which school do you want to go to? Do you want to go to an Estonian language school or Russian language school? When you're a child, you cannot choose. It's only later when you realize that, that's where I was pointed towards. That's where I had to go, and there's nothing I can do. I can study Russian, I can go and live in Russia for a few years in order to learn the language better, but it's too late. And this is the danger here. What do we want from integration? Do we want people to assimilate, or do we want that different parties come together? Would any of the other panelists like to add anything? I would just like to add that generally, as an Estonian, I hope that we have this dignity, that we don't use this ethnicity-based controversies with a political agenda, that as human beings we have the understanding that if we use this type of controversy and when it's used as a political agenda, and that we don't follow this agenda. So perhaps this is a broader process of the society that has cropped up at the moment, that we have this very sharp controversies, and so we should just be calm and peaceful and, dignified. So we shouldn't use this controversies between the different ethnicities. Again, COVID indicated how dangerous it is to live in different bubbles. And this is not about ethnic backgrounds, but we have people who vaccinate, people who are anti-vaxxers, and again, these are people who follow different information and media channels. And again, we can see how dangerous segregation can be. And it's not something that's based on someone's ethnicity. People who don't meet, they live in their own bubbles. How do we bring them together? I don't know. It's impossible, looking at how things are now. And this is just about COVID and vaccines. Well, unfortunately, our time is coming to an end, but I wanted to throw out the word empathy. What does it mean to live in a country where your native language is not the language of the majority, and how do the systems work and how can you access? So when you are in a foreign country, you are an alien, you feel like an alien, people look at you that you don't speak their language, and how does it feel? And that there are a lot of people who don't feel that they are part, and they don't feel comfortable. Maybe we don't sense it. Only when we hear them. We have a lot of Ukrainians, for example, in Estonia, or people from other Eastern European countries. We don't maybe notice that they are here. So we should become more aware, and we should grow this empathy in ourselves. And this is the only way how we can move forward as a society and as a country. Well, we managed to cover a lot of topics with you in this hour and a half. And I cannot probably give you a complete overview, but the fear topic that came up, that people are afraid and only finding common things can solve it. We also talked about how important it is for all stakeholders, and the dominant group has to be ready to take this step forward, try to understand. And this comes with the presumption that integration as something that we adopt as an identity that somebody has set is something that we should try and get rid of. It is also very important that our narrow-mindedness is something that we understand, and we also understand our privileges so that we know how to look in the mirror And as for solutions, the importance of the grassroots level and the role of the state in implementing concepts that already work. Thank you very much for joining us, and thank you for listening. And I did hear some people saying yes, and I saw some people nodding. Thank you very much.